Hello friends, I'm Joseph and this is Almost Sound. We started Almost Sound and its podcast series with one main intention: to help artists, promoters, record label owners, playlist curators, and others in the music industry share their message and views with the world. We hope that you will get inspired by their stories, experiences, and work, and that by spending time with them at home, you will also get to know them as people. Without further ado, let's welcome today's guest. Lag is a DJ and very respected producer who is strong in creating grooves and rhythms, often offbeat but still dancefloor oriented. His music has made regular appearances on labels such as Mord, Elements, Them, and Lady Upperberry, plus a number of remixes on imprints such as, but not only, Green Fetish Records, Coincidence Records, and others. Flamin and I also had the honor to have his remix for a spin-off destination on Metempsychosis Records. Besides being a strong producer and touring DJ, Lag is also an active supporter of up-and-coming producers, and has hosted a Twitch live stream, and now is offering a series of feedback sessions for other producers. In this chat, we go deep into making offbeat music, and why this might or might not work for everyone, and we explore the beginnings of broken techno. We talk about contrasting opinions with people, and we also touch on the subjects of anxiety and depression. And if this weren't enough for a single podcast, you might see that both Lag and I could talk forever about interesting topics. We explore the natural narcissism that affects creators and the evergreen topic of finding fulfillment. In all of this, what strikes is not only Lag's humor, humanity, and capacity of not taking things too seriously, but also his preparation and strong passion for his craft. Enjoy.
Lag, thanks so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. I think so. A couple of things. I think you've been very active during lockdown, which has been a crazy time for everyone, and also for people in the music industry. What is one thing that you feel you have learned during this couple of months, and that perhaps stays with you after lockdown?
Well, there's two things. One, which is something that we actually talked about just before the interview. This is that I have sort of forgotten how to enjoy just jamming. You know, I've created this connection between making music and having an end product, because that's kind of the goal. If you're meaning to live off of this, then you have to turn your hobby into a job, meaning that you have to start thinking about, if something you're investing your time in is going to be released, if it's going to be, shared around enough so that you actually get some gigs off of it and stuff like that. So yeah. I'm using this time to relearn how to just enjoy the process of jamming, making music without any goal. Like if I make a loop, I'm happy with it. If I just sit down and play around with some gear that I have without actually accomplishing anything, just like enjoying the playing around with knobs and, hitting random keys without having any idea what the fuck I'm doing. Yeah. It's just fun. So I'm relearning I'm finding new value in this, and I'm relearning to do it. The second thing is that I always perceived this whole thing, like with the music scene and the clubbing, and I always had this, like I actually worked in a company for a while, and they used to call me the naysayer, because I would basically the worst possible scenarios would come to my mind, and I usually go with them. But so my vision of the clubbing scene was always that most of the people don't really care about the music so much or the scene until it's weekend. So basically they would have, like, Monday to Friday, they would have their own lives, where clubbing doesn't really get to them that much. And it's like, okay, I have a life, and then work, family, friends, blah blah, and then the weekend is there, and then they kind of remember, oh yeah, there's this thing called the clubbing scene, and like with electronic music and stuff like that. and they don't really pay much attention to it outside of the weekend. But it has turned out that like seeing so many people support and think about it and jump onto streams, and not only DJing streams but also like production streams and those chit chats and like everything that's been happening during lockdown. Seeing so much support and seeing people not only supporting with their time but also with money, which like knowing that someone is going to give you money whilst we all expect like a recession and very tough times ahead of us. It's really, it shows a certain amount of sacrificing for something that one would have to see it beyond just like a weekend respite from your life. So I'm very, very pleasantly surprised and very glad that I was wrong in my assessment of, how people see clubbing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that I would like to discuss more about what you just said. Let's start with the first one, which is like, I think if I summarize it correctly, it's like you're refocusing on the process instead of putting all your attention and energy on the outcome that comes from making music.
But also there's it's a different. I remember watching what was his name, Mick Gordon, the guy who composed music for Doom. Which is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, especially from video games. And I actually bought the record. It's sometimes it's on my wall of love, which as you can see, it's behind me. So it's amazing, like metal music, which sounds like no other metal music for the very reason that he would take the time, meet up with friends once a week, and they would just experiment. And so even if we were looking this through the prism of productivity and like making something new and making something different, it's still a situation where one should take the time to just jam and experiment and play around, which I didn't really do enough because I had a feeling. So last year I made more music than I did in the past 7 years combined, basically. Most of it is not out. Some of it is still up for grabs, but sorry. This was because of my mindset that I have to get things done. And whenever I would start doing anything that doesn't lead towards an end product, I would just get anxious and stop enjoying it.
Got it.
But it turns out that like immediately I during lockdown, I sold some gear that was too like menu divey, where you had to spend a lot of time exploring the machine and blah, blah. And I bought a bunch of stuff, which is basically just straight like playfulness. Like you immediately get into it and start exploring the sounds and whatever. So amongst other things, I bought the Minilog XD, and immediately, like within, you can just turn it on and like get through some very basic tutorial, and already you can find new things to do and play with. So I'm really, really, really enjoying it, and I'm really finding new things and new ways to express myself.
Yes.
And it's especially fun when you, by accident, you discover something that has been like a sound that you were not necessarily after, but it's like, so for example, there's a thing that I now know how to set up, and it just sounds like Robert Hood. And I'm like, okay, yeah, okay. So I get the last, like 10 years of Robert Hood. Okay.
It could be, that machine or that part.
Yeah. It's more a concept, but it's still like this machine is so fun at getting you there. So,
so it's, sorry, go ahead.
No. It's just, I was just going to say it's very fun, and it's very rewarding actually. And it's that kind of thing where you have to explain to yourself that it's not a waste of time because there is no end product. It's good for the soul, and it's also good for work. So I'm looking forward to keeping that in mind even after this whole thing is gone.
Yeah, I find that beautiful, and I think it's one of the best things for people who experience that, especially of the lockdown, because it's like, especially if you make dance music, and then at some point there's no fucking club and nobody is dancing, and you have to be like, why should I make dance music? You question that, at least, and it comes to your mind, right?
Yeah.
There's one comment that I want to make around that, which is the losing sense of self. We can talk about that a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say is that there is a book that I've read called The War of Art. That is a book by a guy called Steven Pressfield, where he brings up the concept of hierarchy versus territory, where he says a lot of people, especially when they create something or they're working towards something, like, for example, artists, they are thinking about their purpose in a hierarchical way. I want to be the best, or I want to be better than the other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So eventually they start chasing being better than other people, and they measure their success and their happiness based on the scale where they are. So I'm better than these people. They try to beat the next one up. And then the paradox is that it's never fulfilling. It brings to happiness temporarily, but then eventually, even when you get at the top, you are the best of the best, what's the point? Then you question yourself, like, what am I racing for? Opposite to that. Yeah,
it's what is happiness? It's a moment before you want more happiness.
Exactly. But then eventually, like, it's almost like having a glass that's a hole. It can never be full for a long time.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the spectrum, you have the territory, which means you have your territory, and that territory kind of overlaps in some places with other people where you compete or collaborate or whatever. But the point is that you would do that thing anyways, even if you were the only person on earth. And that is where you find joy by making the art, by putting yourself in doing the process. And I think he brings the example of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was like, high performer, interesting character as well. And he says he's the guy that, like, yeah, of course he trained to be Mr. Olympian, and of course he was competitive, but he's the guy that would train even if he were the only person in this entire world. And that is the thing that's, and he says, as a creator, you might want to question yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? And if it's for hierarchy, you're kind of bonding yourself to something that is never going to bring you happiness or fulfillment more than happiness, actually. So it's an interesting concept that I think, what you said reminded me of that.
Yeah, but it's also, I don't know, it's for myself, it's not that it's not that clean cut. I don't know how to, the concept you described is it divides things into sort of two categories, but there's so much stuff that overlaps, and it's so this was very, very, very confusing for me. So I mean, not the concept, but this entire period, because of the concept that you explained. So for example, I have so I basically have this absolutist way of thinking, which is shit, but I have it.
Meaning that your thinking is polarized. It's like, I believe this and that's it. Is that what you mean?
No. Absolutists, it's more of a thing like it's either 0 or 100%. So it's either that I think that I know everything about something, or I will just give myself a hard time about, like, I will see it as a 0%, even though it's like 70 to 90%. I will still see it as not good enough, and it's just bad.
Yes.
So in this way, last year I managed to, for the first time ever, I managed to pat myself on the back for something, even though it wasn't 100%. It was like, okay, what you wanted to achieve with this is decent. Actually, it was about DJing, because I grew up on Jeff Mills and Dave Clark, and listening to people who share my view of DJing, which is that, first of all, especially when it comes to techno is sort of like, even though it can be very magical and it can be very elaborate and can have a lot of story behind it and stuff like that. A lot of techno is just tool music. And when I say just tool music, I don't mean that pejoratively, like devaluating it. It's very, very hard to sort of capture an interesting enough emotion and feeling that it doesn't bore you, even though it's not changing that much for like 5-6 minutes. But it is that it's predictable. There's like the 4/8, 16, 32 thing. It's also very it's very contained when it comes to differences in like the dynamics of the expression and everything. Like the arrangements are very tame, comparing when compared to, for example, some IDM stuff and like pop music and stuff like that. So for me, DJing was always a thing where you use the tools which are at your disposal to you have the ability to change them, to you be the person who creates their dynamic and everything, and to shape a new thing out of them that will then become yours. So even though there are things that, like, there are still people who I am in awe. For example, I'm in awe at Chris's, the person running Token Records. He has such good like musical sense and like what was the word? He has patience with music compared to myself. Sunil is so great at picking out a certain kind of banger that would never occur to me to play, and like his beat matching is insane. Yes, Sunil Sharp and DJ Pete, just like the selection, how much he digs for great music, and his knowledge of techno and electronic music and stuff like that. And I don't think I will ever be able to beat those guys. DJ Bone with his effects and like scratching and everything. It's like there's people who are just godlike in a certain kind of way. But I realized that the thing that I actually was most passionate about and that I really, really wanted to go into, which is basically including all these different kinds of genres and making it all fit together, even though I'm taking very hard turns very often. I got to a point where I was like, okay, you're okay. You're not absolutely horrible, and there's no reason for you to like. There's always stuff to learn, and there's always stuff to blah blah. But you can kind of get there. That said, when it comes to production, even though I'm sort of happy with where I am when it comes to like sound design and production value and stuff like that, there's still this fight in me that is like literally the two sides that you just explained through that analogy. They are both present in me. So, for example, I'm obsessed with the groove. I'm obsessed with making something that's sort of different and that has a certain very noticeable amount of danceability in it, and that has different rhythms and stuff that's maybe not so obvious and not so like easy to digest, but it kind of creates something of value and opens certain doors. But at the same time, I still have people who come to me and say this track is unplayable. And these are people who love my music and who are they're not trying to like challenge me or anything. They're just like saying, okay, this is so difficult for me and I cannot make this work. So it's sort of a struggle between this is the music that I want to make and I want to make it whether someone likes it or not and whether someone plays it or not. But then at the same time, I'm aware of the art of making a tool and making it functional and making it usable and making it accessible to anyone who wants to use the emotion that you were trying to create. So in the same way as that, I still have like a thing in my head where, okay, I want to make music, but then at the same time, what is the music for? Who is it for?
Right.
Does it work? And within the does it work is the equation of why make music and release it when there is no platform for it to be used the way it's supposed to be used, meaning there are no clubs,
Yes.
there are no parties and stuff like that. And even that, like there's there's always there's was he a Dutch? I think he was a Dutch philosopher, Kierkegaard, who was he basically came up with the word that we today know as angst, which is whatever you choose, there's going to be regret. There's no one perfect choice or anything, and basically there's like if you don't make music, you're going to regret it. If you make music, you're going to regret it. So it's down to choosing what sort of making music brings you joy and what sort of music brings you money if you're going to chase that. So right now there's absolutely no money in the whole equation, and I think that if I were to make music that is sort of for clubbing or anything, it would just remind me of the fact that something that I dearly love is not available right now.
Yeah.
So for me right now, the choice is just like, do not finish anything. Do not remind yourself that this is something that, is gonna fall on like home listening speakers, which are it's
It's different. Yeah.
yeah, it's different. And by the way, this is also one of my conundrums. Like, do you make, like, when I was growing up, all the music that was being made for clubs was being made for clubs.
Yeah.
And these days there's so much music which is made to sound huge and powerful on home listening. Like if you play it off of YouTube, it's going to sound very aggressive and huge and powerful. But if you play it in a club, it's just noise. And also, like, if you record mixes at home, do you record it for someone who's listening to it at home, or are you recording stuff that is supposed to represent what you do in the club? And then are people going to be able to appreciate it listening from their home speakers or like earbuds or whatever?
Yeah.
So it's sort of, as you can see, I'm full of these Kierkegaardian
Of course.
conundrums, and then it's down to actually making a choice and then sticking to it, knowing that there's a certain benefit to one choice that you would prefer over the other.
Yes, yeah, of course. I mean, it's not a black and white thing, and I think it also changes over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly, as you mentioned before. And one thing that is very interesting is, I think these lockdown presented the opportunity for people who generally do club music, like yourself, for instance, to be a bit more free from that. It's painful as fuck, but it's also like, it makes it a bit more free to be like, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy playing with this machine today. If it's not like playable in a club, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
It gives you back the time, or it relieves the pressure from saying you had to make like a banger for a club.
Exactly. There's a release that just like my only release that came out this year, if you don't count the remixes and stuff, is basically this record on Upperberry, the first release on Upperberry, which people from Berlin, they know them for their club night in About Blank. So the release is basically the person running the label came to me and said, can you do something different? And it was so liberating, making music which you don't have to think about the structure, the playability, the usability in the club or whatever. So like the B-side, and there's one digital remix. All the remixes are very, very club friendly. They're very, they're different. They're very nice in their own regard. And I have played them so much. I haven't played either of my tracks in a club because they're just not for the club. But making music that doesn't have to follow certain guidelines and stuff like that is so liberating. and but it's still fun to have a certain amount of structure and certain amount of like, okay, this should be a song. So while there is joy in just playing around and saying, okay, this was fun, and just leaving the machine, there's also a lot of joy of actually creating something that's musical, that doesn't necessarily, it can be electronic or whatever. So we're making electronic music, so it's going to be that. But if it doesn't really fit the clubbing world, if it's just like music, it's also very, 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 very fun. Because then you're faced with the challenge of creating a structure that is for a song rather than a tool, which are very, very different things.
Yes, and I find it interesting that also like a promoter, essentially Upperberry, asked and allowed you to make something that is not for a club. Amazing.
Yeah. It's the I don't know how to properly pronounce his name. He goes by Jew. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but he's very very open-minded and very, very, I'm so grateful that we got to do this together, because I'm also in love with the artwork and everything. We had so many delays and everything because of Corona and stuff, but it's finally out. So if you guys are curious, just Google it. The release is, it's called The New Social Norm. And the A side is originals, and then there are remixes from Jofar, Hapa, and Wallace. And the artwork is by Floating Bastard, aka Marco. He's an amazing designer from Belgrade. He keeps it very simple, but it's always memorable, whatever he makes. So check it out if you're curious.
Yes, for sure. And also I will include it in the show notes of this. And so Floating Bastard, did you choose the artwork maker, or it was their choice?
I recommended him because I was in love of his work for some time now, and it was quite easy to get. I mean, Jew was very into the his style, so we it was a very quick decision.
Got it. Amazing. And there are potentially like one thing that I wanted to ask. So is this thing of trying to make, so having the love for making more offbeat, slightly unplayable tunes, but also being driven to do stuff that works in a club. Like, how do you combine that? Because I struggle with that also. I can see it like whenever I see it from my music or from other people's music, when you do the broken stuff, you almost flip your audience in two. There's a very little part of people who are like, fuck, and usually those are producers or the geeks of music. Like, I love this shit, it's amazing. Like, it just sounds so weird, and like, I love how you process this and stuff. And then the 97% of the people are like, nobody even mentions that, or they just say, this sucks, you know? No one even played.
So there's a bunch of there's a bunch of producers from Slovakia who actually pioneered the style. They're mostly Lokti Brada and Rumenige, and also DJ Boss, HU, who I think he came up with a new alias now, but I keep forgetting the name. So what they did was they pioneered this style, which was very broken. Actually, the first kind of offbeat track was release was by Steve Bicknell back in like 96, 7 or something like that. And let me just try and Google the name of the.
And I guess they spread a lot with the audio salts, no, from Basmoy, I think.
Audio Assault was Basmoy and Jeroen Liebrecht.
Made them, it's amazing producer as well. Yeah.
So it's the Lost Recordings. I think it's the Lost Recordings #1, the Wife Plus for Whom. And basically after that, there was a lot of Slovakian stuff, which was then also picked up by the UK crowd and the UK crowd, meaning like Surgeon, Regis, the 65D Mavericks, James Ruskin, and also some of the Spanish crew, obviously, like Christian Wunsch, Oscar Mulero, but they weren't as much offbeat as they were like broken beat or whatever. Especially Rico. Rico was very broken beat. That said, so my whole point of this was that the Slovakians they made it right. Like immediately they had this style which was very. It could always fit on Trezor, for example, which is predominantly like a 4/4 label, but at the same time they had elements which are very, very broken, very offbeat, and it really, really works well. So my problem is that I'm not the music I'm making is not like, okay, I'm inspired by the straight stuff, but I'm going to make it a little bit more offbeat. It's that I'm inspired by the offbeat stuff, and then I'm going to make like stuff that is one step beyond that.
Yeah.
And this is way more removed from the 4/4 stuff than most of the most of the Slovakian stuff.
Yeah.
And also there's an element which when I say this out loud, it's going to sound pretentious, but I hope that it doesn't, because it's just fact. And this is that people growing up and trying to be DJs in our time, we would have to learn to beat match, and we would have to learn to beat match really well.
Yeah.
And I remember practicing like crazy on all the offbeat stuff and on like drum and bass records, which are played at 33 instead of 45. Then like I remember hearing the British Murder Boys track called Be Like I Am, which is so confusing because like the anchor of the loop changes within a minute.
You mentioned that in the masterclass, I remember.
Yeah. So basically, when you learn to beat match on those things, which are super broken, like the drum and bass stuff was mostly created by using loops which were organic and were not really quantized and stuff like that. So you learn to not beat match on the kick or the snare or the hi-hat, but you listen to the entire loop, and then you get a feel for where the anchor of the loop is, and then you align the anchors, which are like these fictional imaginary points in the loop. You beat match to them instead of beat matching to any certain element, because like a snare could be, for example, a lot of the new UBB stuff, there's only the kick and the snare are quantized. Everything else is off the grid, which is why he has the amazing groove. But then you cannot rely on the hi-hats to get a beat match. So when you learn to listen to the anchor, then all of these problems were like, oh, it's not possible to beat match, are gone. So even though I would love to make music which is a bit more functional, I don't have the sense to judge, okay, this is too staggered or too offbeat or too whatever, because it all sounds to me like it's easy to beat match. It's not I don't hear the problem. That's the thing. So I'm not able to get into this mindset to differentiate what works and what doesn't. And it's just crazy hard for me to do so. So I just, whatever sounds good to me, I make it, and then I hope that people will play it. And I try to make as much possible stuff so that, if I fail with 4 tracks, 1 track is like the 5th one is going to work. So fingers crossed that it's 2 and not just 1 on every 5.
Of course, but there's also the other side, which is like we never control the audience in a way, right? So what eventually they feel about the track is very subjective relatively, and a lot of that is to a certain extent is luck, unless you make a record because it sells that way. But when you make a record that you're trying to express what you feel, and eventually you will always find people who hate it or don't care about it. Of
course, yeah. I didn't want to release Controller. I was like, oh, I fucking hate this. I mean, I was so tired from the track because I had problems with the mixdown and everything, and I was just like, I fucking hate this. I don't want to release it, blah blah. And then Bass talked me into it, and I was just like, and it was quite a few years before I was able to play it and not cringe.
I read that on your post Berghain post on Reddit, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like, so looking back, if you could go back now in time, would you release it, knowing, you know, what it brought to, like, how, in a way, like, do you consider that track as an important part of your journey? No.
I think it was important for other people, and it was important for me, meaning that it brought me some attention and gigs and stuff like that. And it's always important to me because Surgeon played it, and every time Surgeon plays any of my tracks, I just it just brings me joy. And it's in that regard, sure, but there are tracks which I love. My own tracks, which I really, really love playing, and I play them like every set, and they always get a reaction and stuff like that. But people don't like they don't seem to be nearly as popular as that one was.
Yeah, and then so looking back at the process, you mentioned that you didn't want to release it, and then Bass said, "Okay, maybe we should release it." Like, I find it interesting that, like, sometimes as a producer, maybe a person needs to go out of their own head and let someone else help them make a choice on whether they should release the track. Because imagine, like, if you didn't show the track to Bass, or, you know, the track would have stayed in your hard disk and nobody would have heard it. And I guess, I mean, it had a positive effect on other people, had a positive effect on you. So I think sometimes it's also, do you think it's important to let people help your decision as an artist?
Yes and no. It really depends on. I used to, for example, I used to send music to people for feedback, and I would get so many, like, you should do it this way, you should change it this way, and blah blah. And it took me a while before I could differentiate what was good advice and what was advice which wasn't necessarily bad, but it was just like someone else's vision of my music.
Yeah.
And also there was some very bad advice as well. But it's like someone else deciding stuff for you works if you respect the person, if you respect their opinion and stuff like that. And even though maybe stylistically Bass and I don't really align perfectly, I mean, I love his music, I love his sets. I don't mean anything like pejoratively by that. I just mean, like, he's more a 4/4 kind of person, and he goes for, you know, more industrial kinds of sounds, and he has his very, very specific style in that regard, while I'm more like, I will play, you know, Aphex, or, you know, like dubstep or whatever. So we have very different
Who is that person?
Sorry,
who is that artist?
I meant Aphex Twin as like a representative of all IDM, and then I just said dubstep because, you know.
No, of course. Sorry, I meant. Were you referring to someone in particular?
I was talking about Bass Mui.
Okay,
But the thing with Bass is that he's one of my strongest influences. With, like, I've told you about my angst, my indecision, and my, like, seeing everything negative everywhere, and, like, just seeing the challenges and stuff like that. And I used to, like, growing up, I would see the challenges everywhere and just give up. I would be like, oh yeah, it's so many things can go wrong, so I'm not going to do anything. And then running into, like, being lucky enough to meet Bass Mui and to meet, for example, Rebecca. Rebecca is also a huge influence for me. Yeah. Just in, you know, in this way of, you know, I used to think that the bigger players, they didn't have this indecision, and they knew exactly what they were doing and blah blah, but they're so full of questions, and they also have indecision, and they also have these situations where they are not, you know, not even 100%, not even 80, not 50% sure, but the difference between them and myself is that they actually move forward. Like, right. They will say, I have no idea, but let me try, and let's try this, and let's play around with this and stuff like that. So having this healthy approach to, like, like, first of all, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And if it does, that doesn't mean that you're not able to fix it. And if your heart is in the right place, and if you work really hard, you can always, whatever situation that you get yourself into, you can claw out of it. So Basmui saying, let's release this, it's such a, it's a doubt remover. It helps me alleviate so much of my self-doubt and self-critique, and just, he's such a positive influence in the scene, I think. And thank him for existing.
Yeah. I don't know him personally. I have interacted very little with him. It's been always amazing. Every person that knows him personally says Bast is just really, really good. Like a strong pillar for the techno scene for years, for decades actually.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's beautiful because he's in a position where he could just not give a shit about anyone, right? Because he doesn't need to give favors to anyone, but he does it because probably he's very human and he loves what he does. Like, supportive for anyone.
He's so humble, and he works so hard, and he's he also knows, like, he spent some time also sort of being lost in the scene, and I remember him telling me about this situation where he would play. He spent years playing a certain kind of techno, and then he got called, out of touch or whatever by some label, and then Blawan playing the exact same records that he played a few years ago, and then the same magazine calling Blawan Forward Thinking. And he knows, unlike some people who just got to the scene and blew up and never got through a period where they were, down or not in demand or whatever, he knows what it is like to be sort of ostracized by the scene. Not maliciously, but just because, like, there's, it's the scene, it's still business, and there's sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. So he's so humble, he's so compassionate, he's so willing to help out and try something different, and I'm so lucky to be a part of his the thing that he created.
Yeah, of course. There's one question that I wanted to ask about you recently also launched a feedback circle. So we're essentially letting people send you music to a specific email with specific rules to avoid having tons of, like, I don't know, reggaeton stuff. No disrespect for other genres, but
yeah.
And so, first of all, like, what brought you to do that? I think is amazing. It's super important for all producers. What brought you to say, I'm going to invest some of my time and my attention to help other producers?
Well, the thing is that I learned music production in two ways. One was the RTFM thing, read the fucking manual, which so many people don't want to do these days because YouTube tutorials and stuff like that. But the thing is, if you watch a YouTube tutorial, you always get someone else's vision and someone else's workflow and stuff like that. So RTFM is very, very useful if you want to develop your own style. And then if you're working on a style and you create something and you make a track and you play it to yourself, there's a certain barrier that you have to break, and for this to happen, it's very, very helpful for someone else to hear your music and give you some notion of whether it's right or wrong. So the thing is that I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for people like Voidless, Makaton, Surgeon, Basmui. Also a bunch of my friends like Rory St. John, Scalamaria, Omtel guys and stuff like that. Like, whenever you exchange tracks with someone, ask them for feedback. I have a friend, he mixes like Dayan. He's my actually like elementary school friend, and he has a studio and he mixes stuff for metal bands and rock bands. sending stuff to him is very, very useful.
Yes.
He has a very, very good ear. He's like one of those people who can tell you exactly on which frequency to do like 2 decibels of gain reduction on what element, and you're like, okay, thank you, fuck you. And he's very, very talented. And also, so without these people, I remember telling Makaton one time, like, I'm thinking of charging people to do this, not like give feedback, but to mix their stuff and blah blah. And he was like, no, just like pass it, pay it forward, pass it on always. And it just, whilst I do want to be a teacher at some point and like work in a school and still have this thing where, if you're getting a load of knowledge and stuff like that, I don't mind getting paid for it. But at the same time, if you're just sending me a track or two to listen to, I don't mind giving you my time. The thing is that I've been giving feedback for a few years now, and it got to a point where every day I get so many requests from people to play their music, and it actually became quite stressful because I feel like shit if I say no or forget about it or whatever. So like January this year, I actually took a month break from listening to other people's music. And then after that, I was thinking about, even before Corona, I was thinking about doing this thing where once per week or 2 weeks, I would sit down, go through people's music, give them feedback on Twitch, which I'm a big fan of because I love playing video games. So Twitch is like, the way people watch football. I just turn on Twitch and watch people play video games. So it's a platform which is kind of familiar to me. And during this Corona time, as you know, I did like production streams where I would do production and answer people's questions or tell them, like show them tips and tricks. So there was a certain community that was built around this, and I really, really enjoyed that. So this absolutely makes sense, like a combination of interaction and it's just like it's just like 3 hours of my time per week. So it's not too much, and it means the world to someone, maybe just a little bit to someone, but it's also a very nice hangout platform, and people get to hear other people's music, and then hopefully some label might actually see this as something interesting and sit in on the listening sessions, because there's so much really good stuff coming in. And I have to say that it also brings me some hope to hear so much stuff which doesn't sound like other music. It doesn't sound like, okay, this is the way you do acid techno, and then but people are coming up with some very interesting ideas and very personal expressions. So it's sort of, it brings me joy and it brings me hope, and people get something out of it. So it's I see it as like a two-way transaction, so to say.
I think it's indeed like I love that concept. And do you think that you're getting this, let's call it educated musicians? It's not in a positive way. I mean, I'm not trying to sound other musicians that are not educated, but what I want to say is that like you have a kind of, maybe you nourish like a selected crowd of people who interact with you with respect, and then maybe when they send you a track, it's a personal thing they're sending to you. It's not just like they're sending shitloads of demos in a BCC email, and you end up like having to listen to weird stuff. Do you think it's because you kind of created this community around you perhaps with the streams?
Not really. I think there's the community that I speak of it's a small group of people, but most of the people who come to the streams, I've only done 2 so far, and I'm doing like basically every Monday from 6 to 9, like a session. And a lot of people who come in and send in music are people I don't really know. So I think anyone is grateful to get a chance to have their music listened to. But the thing is that I keep this in no way answers your question, but it's just I think it's important to mention that the feedback that I give is my feedback, and it's everything that I say is shaped by my knowledge and my taste, which in no way means that it should be done. It's just like an opinion and a suggestion. Especially when someone sends me like psytrance, which people, please don't send me psytrance. There's nothing I can do for you. And it's just like, you know, there's people who send me stuff that I generally don't know what to say to it, not because it's bad, but because it just falls out of what I listen to and what I think about and know about.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of, and it's also Twitch. So if you know, you get around a lot of random people who don't really, who have no idea who I am. They just want to get some feedback for their stuff. So I think it's a very open platform, and it's a very open like call to participate. So there's a lot of people who will come, get a feedback, and then never come back, which is absolutely fine by me. There's no nothing involved like loyalty or whatever.
Got it. Okay. And one related topic, which is like education. So I think there's two sides of it. One is that like, okay, so you seem to be oriented toward teaching other people, at least music. Like, and if I remember correctly, you mentioned to me that you are going to start a university to eventually, with the aim of also teaching subjects, right? Is that, am I right? Or
oh yeah, actually I finished. I have a diploma in sound design and sound recording and sound design, which is basically doing sound for movies and commercials. Right now I'm finishing my master's studies in the same area, although I'm trying to combine that with music production in a way. So my master thesis is using samples as building blocks within the like combination of sound design and music. So I would love to teach, and the next step would be to get a doctorate somewhere, and maybe get to be a professor, but more importantly, get to apply for research papers and do projects and stuff like that.
yeah,
I wish. So this is coming from a person who plays video games. But at the same time, I wish I had more time for all the things that I'm interested in. So I would love to learn, for example, electronics. I would love to learn to first solder things and to like reconnect and maybe circuit bend and stuff like that. And then to get deeper into it and know how to, like investigate and research different types of distortions and what happens and whatever, but also then go into like theoretical when it comes to harmonies and rhythms and stuff like that. So I would very, very much love to teach, and I see it as this selfish thing where basically I would get to invest into hearing more good music in the future. But at the same time, I feel like just being a part of the scene and being alive and listening to so much good music, not only when it comes to electronic music, but also I listen to a lot of different genres and stuff like that. I just feel very, very grateful to be able to do that, to enjoy so much different music. And I feel a sense of debt, so to say, to give back not only to the scene, which gave me so much good times and like a career as well, but also to give to the entire sort of music scene, not music scene, but like music itself, in a way. So I'm always thinking of ways to do that. Whether it's like, you know, I wanted to quit so many times because of
to quit your let's call it education, or quit
no to quit the scene and everything.
Wow.
It's just like anyone who grew up in the 2000s know that it was much different in that period than it is today. Just like the values, the things that got you ahead, the love for the underground, the sort of gatekeeping, which is a word often used in the negative context, but I don't. There are some things that need to be gate kept. So like making sure that the underground is the underground, and that corporate sponsors, which are often very helpful and very useful to the scene thriving, also don't necessarily get us to only think about the money and only think about the tickets sold, but also get us to experience some stuff which is not like which has a lot of value in the artistic but not necessarily financial. So a lot of that is gone, a lot of the old scene is gone, and it makes myself and people similar to me really want to quit. But at the same time, since the scene gave me so many years which are which make me very happy, I at least owe it so much to, you know, stay active and try to bring the values that I think are good to have in this kind of scene.
Yeah. There are two questions. One is an easy one. It comes from the audience. The other one is a bit of deeper one. The easy one is that, is there any music theory, production book, or resources that you would recommend to someone who is becoming a producer? It comes from a guy on Instagram called SRCX9. I'm pretty sure it's not his or her real name, but yeah. Any books that you would recommend to people?
There's a very, very useful book called Making Music, which is by Dennis DeSantis. It's called Making Music: 74 Creative Strategies for Electronic Music Producers. It's sort of published by Ableton, actually.
Wow.
It's a very useful book if you are into making electronic music, and it has some very nice methods of like approaching the music production process and everything. There's also a PDF that was floating around made by Object, where he describes his creative process, and it has some very, very interesting points in there.
Yeah.
There's also music which is video, which is for like video game design. It's called Theory of Fun.
Wow.
Theory of Fun for Game Design by Raf Koster. It's very, it's obviously for video games, but if you're in any way into video games, and you understand them, the way they work and everything, then it sort of boils down to, if you quantize everything he's saying in the book, it's about creativity. And then there's some stuff which is specific to video games, obviously, but you can basically apply it to creativity as well. So I don't know what else I would recommend. There's I mean, my recommendation would always be watch a lot of tutorials, but make sure to always keep in mind that this is someone else's process. So if you learn something from a tutorial, that's great, but try to make it yours. Try to evaluate if this is something that you need, you like, you want, and if there is any way to alter it and do it differently. Also, a lot of the things that I have come to understand is basically through just analyzing stuff. Like if there's, just knowing the tools, knowing what reverb does, what compression does, what this and that, and then you get to, if you hear a track, you get to hear, okay, that's how he did this, compression or this trick with the vocal and the reverb and stuff like that. So, and then if you really like how it sounds, you get to, apply it in your way and stuff like that. So my only suggestion for reading all of this and doing all of this is find your own way. Think about it enough to create your own methods and your own, workflow and your own approach to music. So to have your music sound like you and not like, whoever is the most paid DJ at the moment.
I definitely agree. And that like it would be such a shame if people like only went for the whatever exists and is successful already route, because you will lose people creativity eventually. Like there's a lot of beautiful stuff, and it's something I think you made very clear at this point when we did the masterclass with you. And it strikes me that also like Scala Meriglia, who just did another masterclass with us, he basically said the same thing. He said, yeah, you know, whatever I'm telling you right now, it's my process. Pick something you like and just do it your way. That's the secret. That's lots of hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. It's so easy to sound good. Like if you understand yourself and you understand what you like, and then first of all, you're going to be passionate about creating your thing way more than if you're creating someone else's vision. And then also you get to understand the intricacies and the small details which actually make the music magical. So every time trying to chase someone else's sound, it doesn't work. It creates, it might put you on a map, but it doesn't put you on a map for a long time, you know. It's just I don't know. It's cheap. It's dishonest. People very much hear if it's you, and even if you don't get like a million fans or whatever, the 5 fans which are big fans of what you do are going to be fans of you, and not your interpretation of whoever is famous.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think it also brings to real fulfillment, or at least you get more chances to get to fulfillment, because if you're just trying to do something that already exists, and if that doesn't reflect who you really are, you're like really, there's a bit of a mismatch, or at least you're not going deep into who you are. And it's
exactly.
Tricky thing. 2 more serious questions, and then I have like the few very small rapid fire questions to wrap up. This is like when I come across your work and you as a person, like I think I consider you a person who is a deep thinker. You really think about stuff and deep into your craft as well. And at the same time, we were discussing that before, like you have a very good sense of humor. You don't take yourself and anything like too seriously. Like, do you find the same? Like, do you think the same about yourself? And if so, like, have you ever thought about what made you develop this kind of personality or outlook of the world?
Well, there's, for most people who are artists, there's a certain dose of narcissism and egocentricity, which really, really does well. Like it ostracizes people, it pushes good things away from you, and it gives you a false sense of accomplishment when there's so much more to learn and experience and grow. I was relatively young when I realized this and then started working on this. The one danger of working on this is that if you work on it too hard, as I did, then you just start shitting on yourself, and then you sort of ruin your confidence and stuff like that. But I'm working on getting it back. So I still have issues with the ego. I still have moments where I'm too egocentric. I'm not aware of stuff outside of my vision of reality, so to say. But what really helped me was being close to people who are very, very different from me, and seeing them approach things and solve situations in a way that would never occur to me, and that my old self would say, this is rubbish, the way they are doing this is wrong, I know the only right way. And then seeing them apply this different method and actually get results in a way which is much more rewarding than my way, really made me realize, okay, you're shit like fuck all about the world and the way everything is. So it's sort of but then again, like I said, there's a danger of believing this too much, like you don't know anything, and then you get this point of indecision that I keep mentioning, where you're like, oh, is this the right way, or is this the right way, and blah blah. So it's very, very helpful. It's especially very helpful if you have this spotlight on yourself, which I don't really have it too much. The way I do music and my approach to music guarantees that I will never be a superstar. But you still get this point which is not realistic, where once per week you get 2 hours when everyone is looking at you, and you get the jukebox controls, which is like it's the ultimate, like when people gather on a party and everyone's like fighting over YouTube, like what's gonna play now,
Oh, fuckers, I decide,
yeah. So you get this like 2 to 4 hours where you're the person of the space, and it's, even though it's an amazing feeling, it's not realistic. And this is not, you're just, first of all, there's professions which are way more important than what we do, right? There's very essential things, but we're just, as humans, we're programmed to give certain things way more attention and way more, to be way more grateful for certain things, because its apparent benefits are much more immediate and much more like just agreeable and pleasant. So first of all, it's not realistic. Like drawing any conclusion from that is not, you're not more important than the person selling you groceries. You're actually arguably, as we can see now in this situation, you're way less essential than, so it's very, very good to keep this in check and to keep yourself grounded, so that you don't give yourself this false feeling of importance, but then at the same time you have to remind yourself that you are lucky to get this experience and to enjoy attention, and to most of all meet so many people which want to talk to you and want to share their life and culture and stuff with you, and that you're lucky enough to, if you meet like 100 people and one of them becomes your friend. I read some article about a research which says that basically you meet, most people meet their best friends until their mid-20s. And then like the new people you meet, you don't really let into your life so much, and you don't really get to you're stuck with the people your mind has already decided are your friends. But with this job, you get to meet so many people, and people who you just click with instantly, and who, because you're not in your country and you're somewhere else, and you get all these like cheat codes in your head which help you, you feel like you're sort of dependent on them, and then your brain sees them as like, opens up more to them, and then you get to actually have a friend, even though otherwise you would have like all these walls built up, and so it's such a great job to do. It's such a great profession, but all of that can very easily go away if you're an asshole. Try not to be an asshole is the mantra that's very good to have when you're a DJ / producer / musician.
When you get a lot of attention from people in general.
Exactly.
Whatever profession you end up doing or activity. And my final deep question is about the sense of anxiety and depression that a lot of people feel, me included. So I throw myself in that bucket, but I think it's almost like something that affects deeply our generation. That's my opinion. I see tons of people who are between their 20s and 30s. They are and effectively are feeling a strong sense of depression and anxiety. And I've read during the lockdown one of your big posts that it was very interesting for me to read, because I think you also made me think about stuff for myself. Like, do you feel that this is something that particularly affects our generation more than others that came before us? And if so, Do you think there is any reason, any specific reason, perhaps linked to our lifestyle, social media, social interaction that drives that?
I think yes and no. I think depression was always a thing. We are just way better these days at diagnosing different things that bother us, or you know, push us towards the unhealthy side, so to say. I think that's a part of it. I think we always had people who were depressed and stuff. That said, we are built in a certain way, and we are prone to. So just to make sure we understand each other, we're not talking about. So I made a very rigid and imprecise distinction between causal depression and endemic depression, meaning causal depression as you're sad because something happened, like you broke up, someone passed away, like a project you invested a lot of time in got canceled, whatever. Which is, you have a fair reason to be depressed and sad, and it basically goes away with time in most cases. And it helps to talk about it, and it helps to discuss it with someone, and it helps to, sometimes if you just have a realization, it goes away. The other thing is endemic depression, which is basically a feeling of, to put it mildly, feeling down because your biology is out of balance. So you're lacking happiness hormones for whatever reason, and instead of you feeling down being caused by something happening, you are starting to think in a certain way because your biology is pushing you towards that. And in a similar way that, for example, PMS, because of hormonal changes and stuff like that, pushes you towards different different moods and stuff. We are talking about the endemic depression, which I could, even though, like I said, I think it was always there. There is always this argument that the way we live today brings a lot of that in. First of all, there's stress. Stress, for example, helps create cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, which also helps ruin the balance that keeps us healthy. There are like the ways we eat, stuff like that, like a lot of processed sugar is not good. A lot of tasty stuff. The reason why it's tasty is because it was very difficult to obtain when we were in prehistoric times. So as a dumb example, even though this is like fruit doesn't really help depression, create depression. Like fruit is more sweet because you have to actually climb a tree and try and get it, in compared to just berries and vegetables, which are in the ground and they're easier to get. So it's like we are built to be rewarded for things which are very hard to obtain. So milk, red meat, stuff like that, it's super tasty, but it's not it's not supposed to be like a daily diet thing. And basically the way we eat also helps create this. Being in nature helps alleviate any depression, or actually helps to someone to avoid getting depressed and stuff like that. And also, social media is like a constant dopamine fix, which just sort of empties your reserve. And it's very, very much like we are built to occasionally have nothing in our mind, to not have worries, to not have things that encumber us through sheer existence of like having thoughts and processing stuff and blah blah. We need some respite, which is, I guess, why meditation has become so popular in past like 20 years and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the internet has sped up things a lot and brought, I think, like exponentially increased amount of stress and rushing. And I think we forgot to be in the now and here, which I also have a huge problem with.
Of course. We are always overstimulated with stuff that are, in a way, it's easier to go and check your Instagram or Facebook and check and get satisfaction from likes than actually having to put your work in something that might give you satisfaction at some point. Or
exactly. That's the concept of short-term happiness versus long-term happiness. So if like it's so the problem with the current climate of the internet and everything is that we've sort of gotten numb, because there's so many things which give you instant satisfaction and there's so much of it. We have gotten numb to the concept of like our feeling threshold has gotten higher.
Yeah.
So experiencing there's a shift in perception of things. For example, I have grown to see happiness as actually being content with things, and opposed to me like 5 years ago seeing happiness as some ecstasy or explosive emotion of like constant joy and like overwhelming sense of joy and it's just a thing of like, and now I'm trying to like just scaling back on things that gives us instant satisfaction leaves room for emotions which are less explosive to be felt and enjoyed. It's taking me less numb to them and then giving me more satisfaction from those like quiet but constant like cuddles of life, just it's the small things, there's two ways to look at having a car. It's like there's always a better car which will give me more joy and more whatever, but then there's like, okay, this is a car and it can take me to a place where it's far away from where I work and I can get to enjoy some sight and spend time with friends which are also less distracted by whatever it is that happens in our hometown and blah blah. So I think that's also a big part of it, like the culture of I and instant gratification, which takes away from actual joy of living, which is, we're so lucky. We're so just thinking about this, like you're 1,000 kilometers away from me and we're talking about things that we're lucky to be able to think about and experience. So that, I think that very much helps. At the same time, it is way more than just thinking about things and having like this grateful outlook on life. And there are people who are way more inclined to have this biological imbalance and to and to get to experience depression, whether they want it or not, whether they're on medication or have the healthiest outlook on life and stuff like that. And I think there's a need to what's the actual word, to like
debunk or
both debunk, and there's a certain stigma around depression and people don't really want to talk about it and they don't want to demand. So for example, if you're depressed and someone tells you there's nothing to be depressed about, that's a very shitty thing to say to someone who's like, it's not rational. You're not depressed because there's a reason. It's just a biological thing. It's just as shitty as telling someone who's in PMS to calm down. So it's just like a thing, but there are ways you can help someone. You can like hug them, you can help them, I don't know, clean the apartment or whatever that would make them feel better and nicer and stuff like that. So, and it's very, very easy. It's just like there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of misunderstanding with this condition. So I think there needs to be more discussion on the topic in a way, not in a way that I'm explaining things for the past hour and like I'm very, as you can notice, I'm very bad at expressing myself in a sentence or two, but there needs to be a discussion which is very, very much clear and very simple and to the point, so that people can easily understand the situation with this condition. And once it's understood, it's so much easier to deal with it and to help someone who's in pain.
And I've come to realize this, especially because of the Black Lives Matters situation, because that brought to my attention that I've always considered myself not racist, and because of that, I always dismiss the problem. So if everybody in my circle would talk about racism, I'm like, yeah, I know it's a problem, but it's not a problem in my circle. Like, I live in London, I'm in a white privileged position, and I've been lucky enough to have been in a circle where people are quite open-minded, and so I have not seen and experienced racism myself, but it does not make the problem non-exist. So when someone will come to me and say, hey, this thing happened, I'm like, let's just not think about it. Like, there's certain explanation. Maybe you are perceiving that in a way. So, and that's sometimes the behavior that I have adopted unconsciously when someone said, I'm thinking about this thing and I'm feeling down about that. I'm talking about more the causal depression than the endemic, which is kind of a different problem. But dismissing it and saying, hey, there's nothing to be worrying about. Like, come on, like things are going to be okay. It is not a very good way to solve the problem. And actually, you're kind of telling that person, shut up, which is the opposite of what we're saying, which is like, let's talk about it. And, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to probably be able to help you, but I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hug you.
That's helpful. That's already very helpful. The thing is that it's by the way, I actually had the same experience. I grew up in Serbia. First of all, there's like no black people here, and we never had slavery, and we were on like Yugoslavia/Serbia was the head of the alliance of the non-aligned or whatever the name was it, and we had so many allies from African countries, and we were basically taught that colored people were our allies and stuff like that. And I just like if you see a black person in Serbia, most often the reaction is going to be, hey, friend, hello, how are you, blah, blah. People are going to be excited to see someone. And I remember seeing, like, when I was a kid, seeing talks about racism. I was like, you guys are just sensitive, whatever, like whatever the asshole-ish reaction to that would be. And I remember landing in the US, spending just a little bit of time there, and just it was just like in the pores. You could sort of sense it without even talking to people, that there's this like racial division between people and just the way that everyone sees each other. And it's so real, but at the same time, I also I experienced we had a very strong campaign against Serbians and large during the 90s for multiple reasons. And I did experience people treating me differently because I'm Serbian and stuff like that. And it's so easy to assign someone else's struggle to something that you went through. Just as a Serbian, even to this day, there's so many, like, just when it comes to my career, it's just like the standard is different. The gear is more expensive here. The income in local scene is way less. The flight tickets are more expensive than they would be if I lived in like Berlin. And I would see this as hardships that you just overcome and deal with, and you kind of move forward. So there's there's a way of like, okay, life isn't fair. It can never be fair. And with a certain amount of unfairness, you just have to deal with. And then it's so easy when someone tells you that they have a great injustice in their life to assign it to something that you dealt with and say, oh yeah, this is the same as I did, blah blah blah, you know, and just went through, and you should do the same and stuff like that. But it's
that's a true fact. Yeah.
It's so we are not built for this. We are built for empathy towards a certain amount of people, and even that is not absolute. And it requires a conscious effort to understand and to try to, you cannot even know how it is, but you can try to imagine and to always leave room for the other person to say you don't get it, and then for you to shut up and accept it that you don't get it. You know, so sometimes I would talk to a person and I would end the conversation and still not agree with them, but it would plant a seed in me that would grow within the next few years, and I would like remember it in 2 years' time, and just it would make sense then, or it would like just a snippet of it might actually open up something for me or something like that. So
Of course.
I really, really think that we, despite the ever increasing speed of communication and, you know, stuff happening, we really, really need to move back to actually talking about things and hearing each other out.
Yes, I agree, and unfortunately, yes, social media kind of force us into like shortening everything in the communication, but also not necessarily to have a conversation. It's more like a one-way thing where you share something and you kind of shut down reactions, or you are allowed to shut down reactions, and things like spread in a way that might not represent the actual concept. Or at least like they don't give like a way for people to communicate and interact. But okay, so you wanted to say something, or
no? I'm thinking about things, but I think I've basically said everything. If I go on, I'm just gonna repeat myself over and over again.
I would go on for hours, but let's make it also interesting for who is going to be listening to this podcast. So let's go toward the wrap up. What is a guilty pleasure track? Something that you love outside of your DJ set type of tracks that you would never play, or you never played yet because it wasn't the moment.
Guilty pleasure. I don't really have guilty pleasures. I stand by every track I love. I'm very much into Justin Timberlake. Wow. I grew up listening to MTV, and I love Timbaland. I really love his production. He's like the only pop person I follow on Instagram, and I love the random beat he makes for random people. He's very groovy. He has some very interesting rhythms, and I love the tape saturation on most of his stuff and stuff like that. And most of the collaborations he has with Justin Timberlake are amazing. So, for example, the Filthy, the main track of Justin's last album, was just crazy structure of a track. I wish it was a bit groovier, but just the build up, the transitions, everything, it's just you know, it's still pop, but at the same time, what the fuck is happening?
Wow.
So I love stuff like that.
It's super cool. I'm gonna check it out actually. Filthy. Yeah.
Filthy.
Nice. And then last question is the tradition of the HoMo Sound interviews, which is we ask everyone, what is a question that you think we should ask our next guest without knowing who they're gonna be?
That's very meta.
To be easy or hard, as you wish.
What is the one album that you think people don't know about and should really listen to?
Yeah.
Especially if it's outside of electronic music.
Yeah. Amazing, yeah. And as you might expect, there is one for you. Like, this is deep. So, which is, what makes your life meaningful?
Music. Yeah, I've grown to realize that it's music. It was, for me, for a long time, it was video games and music. But with video games, it still sometimes happens. It still gives me. I grew up reading all these fantasy and sci-fi books and stuff like that, and with video games, you get to actually interact in a story. But the older I am, just because like the target group is always younger people, the older I am, the more difficult it becomes for me to actually run into something that gets me going. So, for example, the last time that happened was actually this year. Disco Elysium was the game, and it, like, within 2 hours, it got me to laugh out loud, tear up,
Wow.
think about, like, not the meaning of life, but think deeply about some concepts which had to do with politics. And it's a very interesting concept of a game. It's just like an RPG, but it's so interesting. And but the older I am, the more genres I get to enjoy and understand, and the more I get to. So with the video games, it because I'm this age and I'm still into them, it actually, like, with every passing year, I get to connect with people less and less over video games. Whilst with music, it's the other way. So the more I understand music, the more I love it, the more I can share something with someone that I think they would love, and then bond with them over it. So it's like, it's not only the thing that really brings me joy on a personal level, but also brings joy to others around me and helps me amplify my enjoyment of it through empathy and, like, joint enjoyment, so to say. So it's really a thing worth living for, and also giving back to.
Yeah. So music is kind of a conveyor of empathy and connection with other people.
Yes, very much so. It's. I remember talking to my professor of the direction. I don't know if that's the right word, but, like, he teaches movie direction and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something like that he doesn't, with music, he can only enjoy it if someone else is listening to it. So it's sort of like you experience that joint understanding and excitement about a musical piece, and then it's hard to go back to only yourself listening to it. So I knew exactly what he meant by saying that.
Amazing. I think we can end on this inspiring and beautiful note. Like, it's been a pleasure to speak with you and to interview you and get to know you even more as a person, as a being, and as an artist as well.
Thank you for having me. I hope your listeners don't die of boredom me just droning on about stuff.
They won't. I am pretty confident that there's going to be someone, maybe not all the people that end up listening, that are going to listen till the end. And maybe we should figure out a giveaway for people who make it until the end of the podcast. Find the Easter egg at the end. maybe. But anyways, I think someone will enjoy it truly. And thank you for sharing all the things and being very open about everything.
Yeah, thank you for having me. As you know, I enjoy doing things with your crew.
Thank you so much for the support and for telling me this. And any latest projects that you want people to check if they're interested in? And by the way, I've made notes of everything we discussed, so I have like a couple of pointers for people who want to listen to, including your feedback circle. But anything else?
Yeah, sure. Well, not really. I would more likely urge people to use this time to explore other musical genres and discover new bands, because if you're not going to the club, now would be the perfect time to to try and discover some new music which doesn't necessarily come from the big speakers. For example, because it's summer and because it's scorching hot, at least where I am, I would very much recommend to anyone to check out Tina Riven. They are they play barber traditional music with the like American blues guitar approach. And if there was a band that was conveying their love for the sun and the desert, Tina Riven is the one. So, for example, start there, check them out. If you hate them, just randomly click another YouTube thing and go for it.
So the name is Tinnet, not Tina River?
No. Tina Riven, TINARIWE.
Wow.
N. Tina Riven.
Okay, wow, nice. Amazing. Like, thanks so much for being with us again. And yeah, pleasure to speak with you.
Yep. Thank you for having me. Speak soon.
Nice.
Okay, guys, this is Joseph, and this is the outro. If you really like the content, I wanted to ask you, please consider liking us on Instagram or leaving a review on the podcast. Whether you're using that on Apple is very useful for us, and your comment makes all of our work worth it. Also, if you have any guests that you really would like us to chat with, let us know. We take any suggestion or any feedback, and we use it to improve and direct what we're going to do next. If you're a producer and you're interested in masterclasses with artists such as Scalameria, VSK, Romek, Lag, and many more, you can now check our website homosound.co.uk. We have plenty of classes and more are coming as well. So brace yourself, you're going to get a lot of content. And one last thing, shout out for Vlad for editing this podcast and Declan for creating the content that you all see on social media. Plus, of course, big thanks to Juliana, Flaminia, Alessandro and Rick from TapeFeed for all the rest of the work at HoS Sound. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time at HoS Sound.